Hi class. In this video, I'm going to talk about some functions that help us work with strings. First, let's create a small data set. This is the same one that's in the tutorial. I have it written here. Very simple data set with 4 rows and 2 variables. The first function I want to talk about is called separate. It separates a character variable into multiple variables. The default is to separate on anything that is not an alpha or numeric character. With this function, we can pipe the data right into it. The first argument is the variable we want to separate. The second argument, into, is a character vector giving the names of the new variables we want to create. There are other optional arguments. For example, in this code below, I set remove equal to false, which means the original variable is not removed, as opposed to the default remove equals true, which removes the original variable. So here, let's take a look at the data. We are going to separate name, and we're going to separate that into first and last. So now we have a variable called first and a variable called last. So now I'm going to change the data just a little bit, make it slightly more complicated. So the names all get a little bit more complicated. And we're going to look at the default behavior when we separate into 3 new columns, last, title, and first. So I'm separating name into those 3 variables. So notice it has done that, but this title no longer has the period, and perhaps that's okay. If we want to keep the period, we need to do a little bit more work. I actually need to write a fairly complicated regular expression to tell it how to separate these characters. So let me run this. And here, I do now have the period in the title, but again, I had to write this very complicated regular expression. So let's break this down a bit into pieces. So this first part means that a space is one of the separators. The vertical bar, this part, is telling it or. So we're telling it separate by a space or, and then to the right of this, we see a comma. So it will separate, also by a comma. And then at the end, the plus means that it satisfies one or more of these criteria. So we're telling it that a space or a comma is a separator. Regular expressions are hard to write, so I highly recommend using this cheat sheet, which I happen to have open right in front of me. So anytime I write regular expressions, I refer to this cheat sheet. Okay, let's jump into some more string functions. So the rest of these come from the stringer library. They all start with str underscore. String length gives the number of characters in the string. This includes white space, punctuation, etc. So here I've created a new variable that gives the string length for name. So I've mutated a new variable that I've called name length and computed the length of the names right there. String to lower makes the characters lowercase. It can be especially useful when joining 2 data sets and you are unsure if the data was recorded with the same capitalization scheme in both. So you can make the variables you will join on both lowercase. So here I'll make the name lowercase. So we can see it's all lowercase now. String sub extracts part of a string. This is useful when you want characters or numbers in certain positions in the string. I'm going to use this to extract the first 3 letters of the name and the last 3 letters of the name. So for the first 3 letters, we want positions 1 through 3. To get the last 3 letters, I'm telling it that the negatives tell it like a -1 is the last letter. So here I'm telling it to start at the 3rd to last letter and go all the way to the last letter. So there's the first 3 and the last 3. String detect returns trues and falses if a pattern is in the string. So here we'll detect if the pattern AD is in the name. So here, one thing you might notice is that in this name, which starts with AD, it does not detect that string, and that's because A is capitalized. If we wanted to detect both, we can use some regular expression magic and put capital A with this bar, lowercase ad. So that means it'll match the pattern either capital AD or lowercase ad. And we can see that when we do that, it matches that pattern. So that is all I have for you right now. Thank you for listening.